Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 7, the season finale. It's our deep dive. My name is Grace, but of course, I'm not alone. I'm here with Taran Armstrong. Taran, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Hopefully we haven't wasted our time on this podcast.
Some would argue we often waste our time on the podcast. Some would argue not, and though they're the ones who are sticking around. But yeah, Convergence, the season finale, Taran, of season 2. It's happened. I chatted with Mike last night about the episode. Sort of joke. Actually, I really feel like Mike had his most Taran Armstrong type title of the episode, which is, even if it's not quite exactly what we thought, we called it mid-season finale. So yeah, it's pretty Taran Armstrong, if I do say so myself. I don't think we quite feel like it's like mid, but we really liked the title, so we went with it. But I do think that sets us up where Mike and I were with the episode, which is that I think overall we thought it was like a pretty good episode. I think the more we talked about it, the more we liked it. There are a couple of things in here. There are nits to pick, certainly, and some things that I don't love, but I understand why they did it, because it got me to a point, like to a thing that I liked a lot. And overall, though, it mostly felt like the middle of a story, which is accurate because we're in the middle of The Last of Us Part 2, to a degree. So that was sort of like Mike and I's take, but I'm wondering, Karen, what your thoughts were on the episode.
As always, very complicated, I would say. I think overall, I really liked it.
Okay.
I think that the way that they decided to go about it, I even talked about it probably so basically, of course, you don't know how this works, is that
Yeah.
we are going to deep dive into the episode. We have a perspective that is from the game, but we will not spoil anything in the first part of the podcast. And then at the end, we will do a spoiler section, which, quite frankly, I think in this podcast might be smaller. I think there's less to talk about spoiler wise. Like, we can like speculate about the future seasons, but there's honestly not like a lot to do there at the moment. But basically, in a previous spoiler section, I talked about, like, are we going to get an ending that teases day one Abby, or are we going to cut to black and cut to that's it? And I kind of said, I think we need the cut to Abby, which is exactly what they did, and I think it worked really, really well, better than the cut in the game, I think.
I would agree.
And there were also some scenes that were changed from the game that I thought added a lot, and made things more brutal. There was a lot of added depth to Jesse. There has already been a lot of added depth to Dina. So a lot of stuff I really liked. Couple of things I was like, what? Why are we doing that? Like, this seemed unnecessary. So plenty to talk about there. Overall, though, I really liked it. And I think the thing that there's been so many thoughts that I've been having and feelings about the show as well, that I've been having. And I think the main thing is that I think I'm excited about what's to come, while also being slightly worried, because there was some news that there are going to be 2 more seasons of the show, which I'm sure we'll talk plenty about, which initially had me very skeptical. But right now I'm in this space where I'm like, in thinking about it, I think the weakest part of Last of Us 2 is Ellie's 3 days in Seattle. And I think that what that means is that we've gotten through it, and I think that they improved on it in a lot of ways. And I'm actually very excited about what they can do with the story moving forward. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, I think we got through it, and I liked it better than I liked the game, and I'm really excited about what they're going to do next.
Yeah, I think I think I agree with pretty much all of that. I think yeah, talking about Abby being reintroduced at the end of the season, I think it makes sense, and I think it worked here. Other than that, I think that like there's a certainly like a cliffhanger of sorts that feels a little tough, but I think that's mostly probably for us who have the video game. I think even if you don't have the video game knowledge, I think it's a tough cliffhanger.
I think
But
it's a
it's
cliffhanger if you don't have them, because we already know it's not like that big of a deal for us, right?
that's true.
Like
Whereas if
I was kind of pumped for the cliffhanger because I was like, that was cool. But if you're watching and you haven't played the games, you're like, what? Come on.
are you? But
Which I think is interesting.
are you being like, oh no, maybe she, I don't know. It's to some degree it's funny to say that because the show doesn't have plot armor because like Joel died, so it's I haven't really talked to any just show watchers only. I would love to chat with my neighbor about like what he makes of the end without giving too much away, but nevertheless, yeah, I do think the diversion we sort of go on is maybe unnecessary. That certainly feels like they they wanted to make sure that that was in there for the finale, whereas I kind of think they could have left it because we know we're going to return to the show and the Scars storyline. So I think, yeah, it felt a little actiony for the sake of like big HBO Sunday night show needs a little bit of action in there. But shall we just tap through the episode? Taran, we get.
Let's do it. I'll queue up. I have two major complaints,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then a lot of things I really liked. The first and foremost one, as you mentioned, is the trip to Scar Island,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll talk about. The other one is actually the Isaac scene where he talks about Abby, which I'll queue up ahead of time. I thought that was a little clunky, but we'll talk more about it when we get there.
See, so I have a different. I think Scar Island is a little bit like boring and nothing really happens. And then I have a scene that I think I don't really like how they got there, but I understand why they got there. So it's almost like the thing that I think is a critique is a little bit redeemed because they get to a thing that I think is worth getting there. All right, so Ellie returns to the theater, and we're gonna
Well,
get this.
first, we
Yes,
have arrow surgery,
that's right. Jesse is gonna do some arrow surgery and save Dina. Yeah.
where Dina talks about how she can't die,
Right.
and something I talked about a few episodes ago was some of the changes made to Dina and how she is so on board with this quest for revenge because that is what she would have done if she hadn't immediately killed the raiders that killed her family. At least she's like, I would hunt them down. Like that's how you express love. And I talked about this is probably in a spoiler section, how given Dina's condition, we might start to see her change her mind about that, sort of change her perspective on what it means to express love through violence and revenge. And I think we're already starting to see a bit of that change when confronted with actual danger for herself. She's starting to realize, wait, I can't die. The love that I'm having to express right now is not one of revenge, but one of protection, and that's such a key difference. I think that the show is trying to delineate from or to distinguish for the audience, which is that and not to say that protection is always like the highest form of love. That was really the entire point of season one, was to talk about how love as protection can also be extremely destructive. But right now we're seeing an even further sort of distinction there, where love had or Joel had this protective form of destructive love, and Ellie right now has a just destructive form of destructive love,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole conflict is playing out between her and Jesse throughout the episode, and we see some hints of it here from Dina now, and then very shortly when Ellie talks to Dina, we're going to see even more that she seems to be kind of balking against this new version of Ellie that she's seeing. So already I think we're getting some tastes of this, and again I just really like the changes to Dina's character to allow some more of that nuance to come in here.
That's a big thing that I feel like that I'm butting up against in terms of, and I don't think we need to like delve into the criticism that like we've done that so many of the weeks in a row about like there is this reaction that is like a little bit uncomfortable for me. But the one thing I keep butting up against is even if I think people who it's okay for people to feel like they want Ellie to be angry or whatever, or these characters to be a certain way. I am finding as I'm watching the show that I'm butting up against the idea of people being like, it's not nuanced. I'm like, actually, I think this is way more nuanced than the video. I was just replaying portions of the video game, and I literally on your way to go kill Nora, you kill you don't have to, but you can choose to kill upwards of probably 30 members of the WLF like on your way there. And so yeah, it's just like it's a different medium. But I do agree that now that we've gotten the moment where like Ellie has killed Nora, this is like essentially right where we are. Um Dina is like seeing something in Ellie that is worrying her about. And again, I go back to this idea that when they showed up, they thought it was going to be this fun little romp that they were going on. This would be this little adventure. They go, they'd kill Abby, they'd come back, done. And the two things that are happening, one is that's not finding itself to be as easy as they thought it would be. And also Dina is realizing maybe just how, in over their head they are, and how much Ellie is sort of, there is this violent tendency to her, which is expressed mostly through the torturing and killing of Nora. And then this revelation about Joel and who Joel was, and that Joel would kill a whole hospital's worth of people to save Ellie. And so you think about that being transposed onto Ellie, who is now going on a subsequent revenge mission, and how Dina is quite worried about the idea of this happening and that she cannot die because she has a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This conversation with Ellie, when she gets back, she talks to Dina. I thought it was really great, especially with the added context of having just had that flashback episode last week.
Yeah.
I think it really fits in here because this conversation ties into it in so many different ways. One is that, something that you might not have even thought about after the revelation that Ellie knew what Joel did the whole time is that not only does that, sort of recontextualize the way that Ellie's been responding, but it also further illuminates just how much Ellie has been lying to Dina.
Right.
Which has been part of the whole season and very much in the text and even in the inside the episode. Bella Ramsey talks about how Ellie is kind of unmasking here in this moment. She can't hide anymore because she has been hiding. That's been part of why she's been acting the way that she has. She's trying to hide that darkness. And she's also been keeping this secret and lying to Dina, which is exactly what Joel did to her. Yeah. And I think that in the moment that she gets back and she sees, Dina hurt, recovering from this arrow, and she just got finished torturing Nora, not just torturing Nora, but a few ways that the show has really been making things even more brutal, which is she left Nora alive down in B2 where the spores were, and we saw what happened to the guy, I don't remember his name, the son of the soldier from the opening of that episode, where he's kept alive to be like a rebreather for these spores. Right. And Ellie saw that and very consciously made the decision, I'm going to leave Nora alive down here so that she suffers that same fate. That's extremely dark and brutal. And she comes back to I left Dina to go do that. Dina was hurt and I didn't come back so I could go do that. And I've been lying to her this whole time. And I think that flashback episode is almost like a remembrance for Ellie herself, because she's thinking about Joel saying, I hope you do a little bit better. And here Ellie is lying to the person she loves and doing worse than Joel, causing harm to Dina, torturing Nora in a way that, we saw Joel torture people, but not like that. And there was always more of a purpose, right? There was always a protection angle, not a revenge one. And so in this moment, something that Bella talks about is that Ellie is in some ways self-sabotaging here. Not only can she not hide from her darkness in the way that she has been, but by exposing that darkness to Dina, she's kind of like, I deserve the judgment and punishment for what I've done, and so I'm going to tell Dina about this, and I'm going to be honest, and she's probably going to hate me for it. And we certainly see that Dina doesn't respond to it super well, nor should she. She's not only been lied to, but it's a lot of information to dump. And it recontextualizes the entire thing. She's been with Ellie on this journey this whole time, and under, to some degree, false pretenses. And so it's a very interesting and layered scene, and you can see afterward that like Dina is not like abandoning Ellie. She gives her the bracelet, but it has definitely damaged their relationship, and that's something that I think Ellie did in some ways on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, these themes that we keep talking about, I think it's because the show does a really good job of knowing what its main themes are. But this idea of like, who is the villain in the story? Because like when you start out, we meet Abby and she's like, I'm gonna get revenge for this thing that happened, and so you have whether or not you have empathy or sympathy for it, like I don't know, but there is a way in which like they go about killing Joel that is it is brutal, but it's less Ruth. It's they spare everyone else, right? They knock out Dina and spare Ellie, and when Ellie goes to get revenge for Joel dying, everybody is complicit. And so there's this way in which like slowly, I think your perspective on being on board with Ellie getting revenge, you start to then she's stepping in these areas where like, well, actually that doesn't feel that great, to have done that. And I think, well, there's a big thing that she'll do later in the episode, which we'll talk about when she actually confronts Mel and Owen. But yeah. All right, Jesse and Ellie are going to go to try to find Tommy. This is where Jesse's going to have the conversation about how he knows. There's been some reaction, Taran, of feeling like Ellie does a bad job here of not letting like of spilling the beans, as it were, that like Dean's pregnant. I feel like Jesse, like, although he'll be like surprised because he gets confirmation, like he pretty much knew. But I don't know how you feel about the fact that he basically knows that Dina's pregnant, but Ellie in fact confirms 100% that Dina is pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not Ellie's secret to tell, but when you're being pressed like that with some good evidence, like I'm not like, oh man, Ellie really screwed that one up. Ellie screws a lot of other things up plenty bad.
I'm in the same boat here. Yeah.
Because like even if he didn't know for sure, he clearly pretty much knew, and so like the idea that he needed Ellie to confirm it, I think it was more so just like the fact that it was confirmed is another whole level of like, wow, it is real. Like it's not just in my head. And that, that changes things. And of course, he says the same thing. Now I can't die because I'm going to be a father. That it changes things for him.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is, more of the show passing on this message of parenthood. Fatherhood specifically is such a strong theme, but parenthood in general. We're also going to get this notion of like who Jesse is. Basically, we're going to have this idea that there was a woman who came through and wanted him to go to Mexico, and ultimately he decides to stay. Some here, I think it's here as well, where he's going to reveal that he was in fact not a vote for her to go to Seattle, and yet he joined anyway. And I do feel like I like this addition in here of who Jesse is and where his beliefs are, because as much as Ellie and Joel were both people, like Joel was, doing a lot for the community, he was also being like, nope, can't let anybody else in. Ellie has also obviously sacrificed a lot to go to Seattle and leave the community with weapons and things. And Jesse is sort of in this moment feels like, the epitome of what civilization could be. Again, this idea I think that you've touched on a little bit of like, we're whether or not it's supposed to be true, whether the vaccine could have been made, we're really supposed to believe that Joel Joel's decision really sacrificed the idea of community, the potential for humanity to move forward. Jesse espousing a lot of beliefs about like, loyalty for community, specifically Jackson.
Yeah, and again, this is stuff that sort of expands on Jesse from his time in the game, and I really appreciate that, obviously, especially given his ending in this very episode.
Yeah.
The fact that we get to hear a little more from him about what his philosophy is and where he comes from, and how he has very clearly been set up to be a mirror of Joel in the season. The way that he saves Ellie in episode 5, I think. And he sort of has a similar mindset, right? Like the way that he talks about doing what's best for the community um, is very Joel coded. And it's something that Ellie points out later when they're arguing, is that like, well, you doing stuff for the community, that doesn't make you a good person. Like, you left that kid to be stripped and like lynched by the WLF because he wasn't part of your community. And the only real difference seemingly between Jesse and Joel is that for Joel, like Ellie, there was only one person in his community, and that was always just Ellie, or at least from the time that he finally invited her back in, or invited anybody back in. And so, does that make Jesse a selfless, better person, or is he just another variation on everything that we've seen? And that again ties so well into the themes of season 1 and the way that you need to be examining what it means to love and to protect, and what community is to you. And so, yeah, the other thing I like about this is that there is something that happens in stories where if you are, say, a person who really wants Ellie and Dina to like be together because they're cute or whatever, and then Jesse feels like he's in the way, stories will often just kill that character.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they'll do something to get that person out of the way so that they can provide conflict for a little while, but then the thing you want can have a happily ever after. So the fact that he's like, listen, I'm not into Dina like that. Like, I have my own situation that I fell in love with this girl once, and also like I'm the one set up to be the new leader of Jackson someday. And so it's like, you really get, you don't ever, I think, have any reason to feel story relieved that he's taken out of the picture, because he provides zero obstacle to the things that you want in the story. In fact, in many ways, he's being set up as the person who is sort of pushing for the things that you might want at this point in the story, which is, we should stop going after Abby. We should just go and save Tommy. We should be protecting Dina, and he would be such a great leader for Jackson when they get back. And so all of that I thought was really important to see here.
You've highlighted something, which is that I think my favorite stories are the ones that purposely don't remove that thing. Have you watched Past Lives? Have you watched that movie? I feel like that is the best. As you were thinking, I feel like that's the best epitome of like, we're just gonna sit in the fact that like this isn't really possible and feasible, and not
weird movie, man.
I love that movie. I love it. But I think it's like, it's sort of like antithesis to that, of like, we're just gonna put you in the situation where there's no real like, we're not just gonna be like, now
we're not gonna give you an out. Exactly.
Okay, so this is, he's gonna confront her for being selfish, and then they're gonna he's gonna go search for Tommy while Ellie heads to the aquarium. This is where we're gonna get the scene with Isaac preparing to attack the Seraphite Island.
Yes. So they have that argument. Ellie is going to abandon the search for Tommy, and I like this argument because Ellie is so clearly in the wrong at first. And also at the end. But there's a moment in the middle where she makes that case about like, who are you to say that you're better than me because you are saying community. My community was beaten to death in front of my eyes. And so you can kind of get that point, but also I think by this point, you as the audience, even if you haven't played the game, are thinking, stop. No, Ellie, like this is the wrong choice. Like I feel like I can't trust you anymore because you are an addict. And this is what they talk about in the podcast, that they are sort of like viewing Ellie and her obsession with Abby as an addiction. And she has these relapses where she sees the hospital in episode 5 and she's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I can go find Nora. And then she sees the aquarium here and she was fully on board with saving Tommy, with going home. But she sees the aquarium and she's like, wait a minute, now it's right here. It's right here and I can go do it. And she does anything she can in the same way that she did in the town meeting, which is come up with good logical arguments that are complete nonsense lies. Like she can make up this argument about community all she wants, but she doesn't care. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe that it's not Tommy who's being, run down with the sniper. It's like, oh, that might not be. She doesn't believe that. She's just doing anything she can to get her fix. And she's gonna go off and do it. And yeah, we get this great scene where she runs into the navy of the wolves, which was set up previously in that scene with Isaac and one of his lieutenants. I don't know her name. But
Elise, I think, is her name. I think.
Yes, at the Costco.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. Love Costco.
This one, I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, so I don't think it's like a widespread issue. But this scene, for whatever reason, just was clunky to me, just like grated in a few different ways. And I think it's because. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
I just think that in here, like this feels the most to me. Like I kind of had been saying it all season long. Of like, we really haven't got that much Jeffrey Wright, or like we haven't got that much Catherine O'Hara. And like when you look back, like Joel, like Pedro Pascal was in like 3 of the 7 episodes, and he's like in almost half the season. But there is something that the way that these stories are told. I mean, if you look at them from a video game perspective, like you play as certain characters for an extended period of time, and there are other people that you don't see, and yet this is the most that I feel like like you can feel them doing a really good job, I feel like, for most of the season to resist the urge to be like, we got to put Catherine O'Hara and we got to put Jeffrey Wright in more scenes. I feel like they did such a good job of like not using these actors that they have who are incredible. And yet here is where I feel like, I don't know, it's just like it's the finale and they're like, we got to do something. And so we're going to put Jeffrey Wright in this scene. And I just kind of feel like it's the first time I feel like they haven't restrained themselves as well as they have the rest of the time.
I guess what I'll say is that I actually I don't mind the scene's existence because I think that it's doing a few important things. One is that it's setting up that there's a big battle coming, and that's kind of tangential right now, but I would imagine important later.
I would complain about it later if they was like, they really could have set this up in season 1, right? Whether it's like, if they don't do it here. So I'm completely talking out of both sides of my mouth. But
and then the other thing I think that is important that it does is that it sort of like reintroduces the concept of Abby from another perspective. And from this perspective, she's not a soldier. She's a leader. She's somebody that is hope for the future. And that's such a different perspective than the one that we have of Abby. And it's very interesting coming from Isaac. I think those two things are pretty important to convey. I just felt like the dialogue let the scene down for me, in the sense that Isaac is saying like, well, we need to find Abby. She's so important. And I was like, why is Abby that important? Like, come on. And then the lieutenant is like, why is Abby that important? You have a whole effing army out there. And I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking. This is weird. And then he was like, it's not about that. It's that you and I are likely to die. And this was fine. But then he says like, it doesn't matter how much of a cool name our army has. I was like, Like, really, Isaac? Like, this is how you talk? You talk about how cool of a name your army has? That sounds like something that somebody would say if they weren't a part of the thing. You know what I mean? Like, how often do you, like, if you're like on the Timberwolves basketball team, are you going to be like, man, it doesn't matter how cool the name of our team is, guys. We need to, have leaders on our team. Like, that just felt weird to me. And then, he just like very clearly lays out like, well, Abby's supposed to be the leader. And she's, well, Abby's gone. And it just felt, I don't know. I felt like there was a much cleaner way of doing this exposition. It just, to me, stood out as a little clunky. But that I would say is a relatively minor issue. Overall, my other complaint with the Scar Island is going to be a bit bigger.
Yeah, I agree that it's pretty minor. I do think it all comes from the thing that this is one story split in the middle here, and they're being pretty faithful. And so I feel like, I don't know, if they were like totally re-envisioning how to make this story work over 2 seasons, I think that things might be deployed a little differently. Like I guess because you got to go do the flash. Like, it's one thing I'll say is that like it is interesting that we get a bunch of Isaac stuff, but you can't do any Abby stuff because you need the thing of like flashing back to day one of Abby by the end of it. So I think it's just, I think I'll be totally fine. Like if at the end of season 3 I'm watching this and I'm binging it, I think I have no problem. It's only in the moment that I'm being like, it's not totally working for it. Again, it's very minor, but like, it's not totally working for me, and I think this is probably why.
Just to maybe
Yeah.
like help explain, just so, like, I think an example of what I'm talking about or what I would have been looking for is, instead of all of the setup to be like she's going to be the next leader, just like I would just like have it already be known, like, hey, where is
Right.
Abby? Because what happens when both of us die? Who is going to, continue the WLF after we're gone?
Mhm.
And her being like, well, she's effed off, so maybe you've had it wrong this whole time. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
the fact that he's like explaining it to her in this, like, Abby's supposed to be the next leader and you're telling your like highest lieutenant like right now, like,
I
it
keep
just
saying
felt
this.
weird.
I keep saying it, but I'm planning this D&D game where like it feels so often that like because I'm writing the story as I'm going, it has to be like, and suddenly this person says this very important piece of information that there's no real reason why they shouldn't have said it before. So I think you're absolutely right that like, yeah, there shouldn't be a thing that he's like, and also secretly she's the next in line to be the leader of our organization. That does feel a little silly, unless you give a really good reason to why he can't say that, but they don't. So it's pretty shallow. All right, this is where she's gonna end up on the beach on Scar Island, where she's
Yeah.
apprehended. And yeah, I think it does feel like a pretty general consensus that everyone's like, why did we do this? Why did we do this? Which is just more, the Scars are fighting, put Ellie in a little bit of danger, have her get out of it. But this is like the most annoying James Bond villain thing of like, I'm gonna put you on the table,
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave the room. Instead, it's like, we're gonna hang you up. Now that we can't hang you up, we're just gonna let you go. We gotta go deal with other
It's
stuff.
like it would have taken 5 seconds to slit her throat. You know what I
It's
mean?
yeah,
And instead, we're gonna leave her and her gun.
it's
Oh,
very
we're being
bad.
attacked. Let's leave one of the assailants with her gun as we run with our backs to them.
Yeah.
That alone was annoying, but like the entire point of being here was seemingly pointless also. Like,
No.
some of the reasons they gave for why we had this detour were to sort of like further explain, like, oh, like, look, this is where the attack is happening, in case you didn't get it already, which quite frankly I think you did. Like, they're on a boat headed toward an island. He's talked about the big assault. Ellie shows up on the island. You're like, oh, this is probably where they're being attacked. Oh, look, they're being attacked. Another part of it is this notion of like, look, children are involved in this
Yeah.
cycle of violence. Isn't that disturbing? Ellie was just trying to save one of their children, and now one of their children is giving the order to gut her. Isn't that brutal? And that's fine, but I feel like they've already conveyed that message multiple times across the season, with the introduction to the Seraphites to begin with the boy who's being tortured by Isaac, and then the scene at the television station, and then the gutting that they already witnessed in the woods. And I thought that was a little clunky too, where like in the woods when they're seeing the gutting happening, sure, it's not a child, but like there was no instinct from Ellie to save that person. I get it. The idea from Ellie trying to save the kid with Jesse is that she sees herself in the kid, but it was a little jarring to me in the moment. And then to get to here to like explain, I don't think any of that was necessary. I don't think any of it was necessary. And then the other thing was that they were like, well, this was Ellie's final opportunity to turn back. It was like the universe telling her that the way forward is death. And after she escapes the Seraphites, she could go back. She could turn back. But quite frankly, that never crossed my mind when I was watching this scene. And I knew she was going to go, so maybe that's on me. But like, I never even thought to have the thought of like, oh, well, that might make her finally turn back. Of all the things, like Tommy being in trouble, I think is a way more compelling reason to turn back than like, oh, a kid just wanted to gut me. So that all felt weird. All of that to say, I think there's a world where this works. I think that we could totally explore something like this, but the execution of it did not work, I think. It was
they didn't kill Ellie. The execution didn't work at all. They were not able to kill Ellie.
Completely correct. It was way too short. It was, I don't know, I didn't look, but it felt like 5 minutes all in of like crash, like washing up on the beach, getting strung up. It probably was less than that. It was probably like 3 minutes, almost hung, and then back on the boat, like from her on the boat with the wave to her back on the boat heading toward the thing again, felt like 5 total minutes. And it was like, what was that entire detour? And in my head, I was thinking, oh, well, they must have just taken a scene from the game and really condensed it. But then I was like, did they take a scene? I don't remember that scene from the game. But I have to imagine that most people watching, if you didn't play the game, you had to be thinking like, oh, that must have been like a level in the game that they condensed, that they needed to include. Turns out, no, that was a cut level from the game that they intended to include in the game, but cut out of the game because it didn't fit.
That's brutal. That's brutal that they the very long video game, they cut it out because it was like unnecessary and didn't fit. Can we play out? There is I think a way to explain that. This is what it feels like. Is Taran, you are Druckmann and Mason, and you have done the thing, and I'm an HBO executive, and I come in and go, hey, you guys finished the script for the finale, right? You finished it. So we just got the feedback about the House of the Dragon finale. If you could make sure that there's like a big battle sequence, that would be great. People would be really mad if there's no, fighting and big act. So we really, if you could put that in there, the finale, that would be great. Same thing. I think you can rework it to say something. I don't think this does what they're. I mean, I guess other than you can say, well, yeah, it's just that we've seen it a bunch, in which case you can say like, reiterating the point, but I just think this was quite pointless.
I think most damning is that we didn't learn a single new piece of information from this. And I think there's a world where maybe they had 8 episodes. And maybe with 8 episodes, you have more time to actually spend some time on Scar Island and get to know the Seraphites a little bit more. And she has a bit more of an experience, and her surviving the experience does feel like she just barely made it out of there. And you do start to reconsider, is she still going to go to the aquarium? But 3 minutes of almost being hung is just not it. I don't think it accomplished what they wanted, and it should have just been cut out. When you have a scene in a show, in an episode, where if you fully cut it out, nobody would ever even come close to knowing it happened, which is like Ellie on the boat before the wave, and then Ellie on the boat after the Seraphite Island. And it's like, nobody would ever know that was missing. It's like, ooh.
Bad. Okay, Abby's going to go to the aquarium, where she is not going to find Abby, but she is going to find Owen and Mel. She's going to hold them up at gunpoint. Owen tries to grab his own gun, and he gets shot in the throat. Mel is going to get nicked in the neck by the bullet that went through, and she is going to tell Ellie, she's basically going to try to walk her through how to save her baby, and ultimately Ellie is going to be too much in shock to do anything about it. This is so I said this last night. I think my only thing is like, I do find the like shot through the neck that tinges her on the, like, gets her on the neck where she's gonna bleed out slowly. That I'm a little like, okay. And then, but then the scene of her trying to walk Ellie through how to do it and Ellie deciding not to do it or being too much in shock to do it, I think it's really powerful. So ultimately my like critique is like, I kind of get that they wanted to get to a situation where we really explore this particular moment, and I really think the moment is quite strong. So I am okay with how they set it up, even if I think it's a little clumsy. But I'd love to hear what you make of this encounter.
I would say the one point of defense I would give to how it's set up, because obviously it's like extremely convenient in terms of like the amount of damage that was done to each person so that it could happen in this exact way. But I do think, for me at least, the way it was presented really helped alleviate most of that, where Ellie shoots what's the guy's
Owen.
name? Owen. Ellie shoots Owen. And first you're like, holy shit, that went through his
Yeah,
throat.
right in the throat. Yeah.
And then you see the bullet hole
Cool.
in
Yeah.
the cabinet, like the metal cabinet behind them. And you're
Yeah.
like, wow, it just went right through his throat. Wait a minute. Oh
Yeah.
geez, she was standing right behind him. And then you see the blood.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good series of like helping you get there. That I think, I would imagine, at least, hopefully, it clearly didn't entirely for you, but I would imagine for most people, hopefully helps alleviate a lot of that, like, oh, classic trope of somebody is shot, accidentally.
Yeah,
Um,
because because I will say, I presume, I've not really looked, but I presume most people are mad that the change between the video game and the show is that, not that either killing or, but both kind of feel like self-defense, like more feel like, so basically she shoots Owen in the stomach as they're like wrestling over a gun. Then her and Mel are fighting over a knife. She stabs Mel in the throat. Owen, like as he's dying because he's been shot in the stomach, is like, she's pregnant, basically. We cut reveal Mel's pregnant. I actually like have no problem with the fact that like that basically like I have no problem with how they both die, basically, other than that, like, again, the way it sort of happened. I don't the Ellie's
I think it's
role
more
in the,
convenient in the game, quite frankly, with the whole like, oh, shot through the stomach, like that's a little more tropey to me.
I think it's more, to me, it's more like you feel the action in it of like, I I agree that it feels more tropey. I think it works a little better, except you can't shoot Mel in the stomach and you can't shoot Owen. You know what I mean? Like you have to, Mel has to be kind of alive for this, because like in the video game, there's no even thought that you would save the baby. And this to me is like what I think is the strongest part of this scene is this
Yeah, so
idea.
let me try to just make sure that we explain it properly for people who haven't played the game. Basically, in the game, very similar scene. Ellie shows up. She says the same things. She does the thing that Joel did, which is you point on the map and you'd better point on the same place, because she's trying to be Joel, but she's not. And it doesn't work. And in the game, it doesn't work because Owen jumps her. They fight over the gun, and he gets shot in the stomach in the process, which is just such a classic, of course, trope of how that happens. And then Mel attacks her, and in the shuffle, she kills Mel because Mel's trying to kill her. And then yes, then like Owen's like, oh well, she was pregnant, and then she goes and she looks and she finds that she's pregnant. She's like, oh wow, that sucks. Um, I think so, like basically, like in terms of the way that it's changed, Owen still tries to essentially get a jump on her, but it doesn't work. And instead of Ellie killing Mel entirely in self-defense and then finding out afterward, oh, she was pregnant, it's like that was an accident. Ellie really didn't even mean to kill Mel, and you could say the same in the game, but I think the impact is I would say diminished a little bit. When I played it, at least, it was like, well, what did you want me to do? She was trying to kill me.
Yeah, yes,
Like,
100, yeah.
So Mel didn't feel like collateral damage as much. Like, it was more in the broad sense of like, well, if I hadn't been here, then none of
Right,
this would happen.
right.
Like, but once the dominoes started falling, they had to go in the way that they did. Whereas this one felt like you just shot and killed a pregnant woman who was not even trying to attack you. And then in the game, yeah, there's no idea, no sense of like trying to save the baby or anything. This was an idea from Craig Mazin, that Mel is like a medical person, and she has her own sense of love and protection. And this is going to mirror the scene from Dina earlier in the episode, where she is now in trouble, and her first thought is not about me, but about the baby. I can't die. In this case, she's going to die. So instantly, she just goes into this mode of, you need to cut it out. And I thought that was such a clever way of doing the scene.
Mhm.
It's incredibly traumatizing and brutal. I'm like right there with Ellie, with like, okay, like what do we do? And then eventually kind of realize, like, what am I can't, like, what am I gonna do here? Like, even if she does manage to do it, like, what is that even? Where are they gonna go? Like, how is it gonna survive? Like, but it's all Mel can do, and it's brutal. And like, I felt this so deeply of like look at what you have wrought here. Like, this is devastating.
Yeah, I made this joke last night with Mike. I didn't realize I was going to come on a podcast and be basically anti-choice, pro-life. But I think to me, in this world, in this moment, I think, and I feel really bad saying like right thing to do. What I wish Ellie would have done is try to save the baby. That's what I like, and I totally understand that is like an incredibly complicated thing. First of all, whether Ellie can do it, successfully or not, but then also like, yeah, we joked about like, what does she go back to the like she births a baby and then brings it back to the theater? Like, so, like that's like an immensely complicated thing. And I think for like many reasons that are understandable, Ellie doesn't do anything.
Well, and I think she wanted to, but something that they talked about in the podcast is that it takes a tremendous amount of willpower to
Right.
cut somebody's stomach open and try to pull out a baby, right? Like, that's like, how do I do it? Like, this is going to be gross. Like, how deep do I cut? Which direction? How do I get the baby out? There's so many different things. Mel's spouting nonsense now because she's about to die. And like, it requires a huge amount of mental fortitude to be able to actually start that process. And by the time Ellie's worked herself up to maybe doing something about it, it's too late. And the thing that is particularly devastating about that is that line earlier in the episode when she says, yeah, when I beat and tortured Nora, it was easier than I thought.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. She has willpower to do that.
exactly. The willpower to do violence for revenge was easy to muster. The willpower to do violence to protect, not as much for Ellie.
It's why I think it's incredibly dark, and I think like I feel bad being like, oh, I think Ellie makes like, I guess what I'm saying is a selfish decision, but I do think she does, and like it is understandable why she does it, but I think when like Jesse is yelling at her earlier, being like, you're selfish, like there are a bunch of reasons that she chooses not to do this that I think, you know, some of which are like, yeah, we'll make her like whether or not she can, she'll be able to, and also that like it will be an extremely complicated situation of like, she's caring for the baby of a woman she killed. I think it's so incredibly on point to the themes of the show that I'm like, it removes any qualms I have about how clumsy I think Mel dying is. I think this moment is so additive to the show in terms of what the show is trying to tell you about many different characters and themes and all that stuff. So I think this is incredible.
And we of course would be remiss to not at least touch on the point that to remember how Ellie was born,
Right.
which is a
Yes.
very similar situation.
Correct. Okay, Tommy and Jesse do arrive, and they're going to bring Ellie back to the theater. We're going to have another Ellie Jesse scene where they're going to chat. They're going to talk about heading home. What do you make of this? That we get this another Jesse scene. Jesse talks about who says we'd burn the world like, to save you. I think
He
Jesse says
says
that about Ellie.
yeah, basically like the way that I'm interpreting this scene is that Jesse is still pretty upset, but like Ellie is also like sort of like with an addict, right? Like I am frustrated with the fact that you have been lying to me, that you did this thing, but now you're in trouble. Like you're hurting, and Jesse is the kind of guy that's going to help. And so even though I'm sure he has plenty of other things to say to Ellie, in this moment he knows that she needs at least some kind of positive reinforcement. And so, is that the right thing to do to validate to some degree her willingness to burn the worlds? Who knows? But he does it because he wants her to know that he still cares. And also like how true is it, right? Like, yeah, she'll burn the world to get revenge for Joel, but who was the world just earlier that day? The world was Jesse and Tommy. She abandoned them to go get revenge.
Yeah.
So how true even is it? Like maybe someday, Jesse could rise to the importance that she would burn the world to protect him, but he was not quite there yet. And maybe this was the start of the path to get there. But it is tragically cut short.
That to me is the important piece of like they're basic like I feel like he's trying to it's what makes him actually a really good leader is that I think like and actually this relationship actually reminds me a little bit of Maria and Joel, where when we meet Joel at the beginning of the season again, he is like doing a lot for the community. He's become like an important person in this community, and Maria is trying to like basically get him to open up his like expand who is part of his world. She's trying to say, there are outsiders need to come in. You were an outsider once too. Like that's what we need to do. And I feel like Jesse is trying to come like almost impart the same sort of wisdom on Ellie of like, yes, it's a good instinct to have, but also like you got to expand who's part of your world. So I quite like it. It's very unfortunate that then Jesse and Ellie hear commotion, run outside to the main lobby, and Jesse is shot and killed. And
yeah, and so I think something I hope that people who unfortunately because there's years between seasons, you might not have made the connection. I think something we probably talked about in spoiler sections for the season 1 podcast is the whole segment with Melanie Linsky's character, which was I believe a 2-parter. In season 1, where we were introduced to the 2 brothers, the little brother who was deaf, who ended up getting infected, and this whole city that was crumbling under the leadership of Melanie Linsky's character. I don't remember the name. And it was because she could not let go of the fact that the person she loved the most, her community, died. Right. And because she couldn't let it go, she pulled everyone else down around her with her, literally as the infected came out from the ground and destroyed the entire city, basically. And we talked about the time about like that was a show addition. That was not something that was in the game, and something that really helped tie in some of the themes of season 2 into season 1 before we got there, because now we are seeing Ellie go down that path, follow those same footsteps, and we are seeing the destruction of not only people like Mel, but now also Jesse, who she has pulled down with her, who was there to save her, to save his community, and now he's the one paying the price.
Yeah, it's a really good point. The Melinsky story. So Jesse is killed. Abby is going to basically say she's here because her friends have died. Ellie is going to say that she's the one who's killed them, and was the person who Joel killed killed Abby's father. And Abby will basically tell Ellie that she's wasted her chance to live. And
You
we're gonna
wasted it. I love that line.
yeah, it's really good. It's like I let you. This is I was saying earlier about this idea that like, um, yes, for as like ruthless as it is to kill Joel, they do let everybody else live, and Ellie decides to pursue them in vengeance, and it ultimately ends up in Joel or Jesse, sorry, having died here, and Abby is going to presumably shoot at Ellie.
Cut to black.
Cut the black.
And then we cut to Abby waking up, which I love the way they introduced this sort of motif in episode 5, where we see at the end of the episode Ellie wakes up, woken up by Joel, and then that starts a flashback episode, and so we get Abby waking up. The contrast of the storm beating down all episode, and then the beautiful day
Yeah.
that in Seattle for Ellie waking up, or for Abby waking up, and then going out into the stadium. It's really cool visual, and the title drops Seattle day one. I thought this was really well done. I think that given that this is where they basically had to end this season, given that they were breaking it up into multiple seasons, and this just straight up is the only stopping point that they could feasibly do, given what they had in front of them. And I think it also is just the best stopping point by a huge margin, especially the way that they did it. I think that this was phenomenally done. I think the biggest issue that I or most viewers, I think, may have with it is more of a practical thing, which is this is a fantastic season ending. If next April we got season 3.
Yeah.
This is a bit more frustrating if they haven't even started writing season 3 yet, which they haven't.
Yeah, they have not. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this again. I feel like this will work way better for me once like season 3 is finished, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I think in the moment I was a little like, okay, like I think the shot of, I guess I really I want to try and think about why the shot of like the baseball field. I thought it was really cool. I'm trying to think of like what thematically that says, which I guess is the same, sort of counterpoint to the idea of I think what Jackson represents, which is like what could be, what could be safety, what could be progress, what could be like a path forward for humanity, knowing that we're going to get to a spot where like over these 3 days, Abby and Isaac are clearly like a little bit at odds. There's the war with the Seraphites, and then also that there's going to be this piece with Ellie. Like the idea, I guess, that like all of this progress that's within the baseball stadium is like at risk, I guess, because of these other things. I don't know if you have another. That's the only piece that I'm like. I think it's such a. And if it honestly, if it's just it looks really cool, that's also probably fine. But it's maybe just like not quite enough for me. I think as like, oh, that was an awesome last moment. I thought it was like cool, not amazing, but I think it'll be fine in retrospect once we've had season 3.
I think the point of it is promise. It's promise of what's to come. Theoretically, like look at like this big world that we've only gotten hints about so far here in
Right.
Seattle.
Right.
We are now going to explore that world,
Right.
and also again the contrast, the difference in the weather, the sort of like peaceful, happy-ish sort of vibe contrasts so heavily with 3 days later where we have gotten to, in the same way that the flashback episode we contrasted Ellie torturing Nora straight to her waking up by Joel. And so I think the contrast there, the visual, that's all there to give us this promise of what's to come. And I think also importantly, like, you don't know when this is yet until the title drops. And so I saw a lot of people talking about, like, when it cut to Abby waking up, they were like, oh, she killed Ellie and we're in the future and now Abby's the main character.
Right.
And then the title drops and it's like, oh, wait, no, this is the start. This is day one. Okay. And so that was like a bit of a little mini twist for them. And I thought what else was interesting was that I saw a lot of people, TV show only viewers especially, who were like, many of them were like, I can't believe I might have to wait 2 years to see this. But that's because a lot of them were also like, that was really cool. I'm super excited to see what's going on with Abby and all of this stuff in Seattle. And what I will say is, I think even some of the most fervent people who loved the video game might say that is not a feeling that they felt when this scene happened to them. That they were not excited about it and they were dreading it. And many of them would say it took. I won't go too farther, but like that it was not enjoyable for them at first. And so the idea that the TV audience is excited about this tease of like, let's find out more. Let's see what Abby is up to. Let's see what's going on in Seattle, why this battle is happening, what is going on with Isaac, and why is Abby a leader? I think those are all interesting questions to examine. And the promise of them in a future season, I think, is a very cool way to end this season, given where it leaves off and where we know it will end up.
Yeah, I do think that it's very interesting to think that both, I think, show only fans and video game fans seem to be both very excited by the idea of Abby on the show. So that is a tremendous difference between the video game and the show.
We need to talk about how dramatic this is. I genuinely believe that this is a culmination of a lot of small decisions that were made across the season that have led to an ending here that feels so different than how it did in the game and in such a better way. And I think a lot of those changes were criticized along the way. Like, why did this happen here? Because this is going to ruin this. But I think that throughout the season, I was saying, I think this helps narratively get us to a better place. And I think that we are there. Now, I say that with the caveat of what I said at the beginning of this podcast, which is I think that these 3 days in Seattle from Ellie are the weakest story plot part of the game. They're very gameplay heavy. They're very mopey. And they are just there to show an escalation of destruction. And from here, I think that the story is better, and more, I would say, conventional. And I think that is a very good thing for the show, because I think that it did its best to push a narrative forward that was not ever meant to be a viewing narrative. It was meant to be a gameplay narrative. And now that we have gotten to a place where I think a more viewing narrative can happen, I think it will really start to take off again. And so the fact that we are excited to get there to kick that off, I think is very important and very good.
Yeah, I think I said this with Mike, or maybe it was with you last week, but I do feel like season 1, for what it's worth, is a very, conventional, tropey story that feels innovative, that feels new and fresh. And it's really well done. The thing about the story in season 2 is actually, if you were like to sort of like bird's eye view look back and sort of take out like the way that they structure everything. It's also a fairly conventional, story. It's just that they do the way they choose to tell the story feels a little, and then I do feel like splitting it up is the right decision, and also in the middle of that story feels very clunky because this season actually, like, it takes 2 episodes to get, to the point where Joel is dead, and now we're gonna go on the story of Ellie looking for this character who's on a quest for revenge, and the consequences of that choice and decision. That's pretty typical. Now we're gonna, like, cut back to the other side of that, and see how things play out. So it is a little, but I agree with you that this is probably, I think season 3 has a ton of potential to be extremely good, because I think probably the back half of the game is better than the front. I like the video. I know this is like a little bit of debate in the YouTube comments of people being like, people who love the video game are being like, stop. It's like, it's basically the like, who's the character? This was like, stop, he's already dead. Nelson, I think. Like, stop. So yeah.
I think maybe if you haven't listened to me talk about adaptations a lot, I tend to be not precious about source material. When I talk about the Wheel of Time, which are foundational books in my entire life and personality and like understanding of the world and love of fantasy and story, and like I love them deeply, but I'm ragging on those things constantly because I think there are a lot of ways that they can be improved, and I feel the same way about things that I do, things that I love and like, and so I certainly don't mean to. And I think I try to make this point as well, which is that like if it works for you, I think that's great. And when I say like I think this works better, I'm talking about how, in large part how it works for me, how I think it would work better for other people. But at the end of the day, it's always just the way that I feel, my opinion on it. So it's certainly not the end all be all.
I'm a big believer that I appreciate the video game because I love the swing they took to play around with things that I feel like are were interesting for a video game. And so I actually think that they have approached a different medium, which is television, in a way that I think still is being true to the things that they were trying. And I think in many ways they've been more successful at implementing some of the things. Whereas I think the best example is Abby, that when the first time we meet her, she's like, I'm going to get revenge for Joel killing my dad. I'm like, that feels reasonable. And then she does the thing. You're like, this feels unreasonable. This feels unreasonable.
Exactly.
And then you have this thing of like with Ellie being like, I think it's reasonable for her to go try to, kill the person who killed, her father figure. And then as she's going, you're like, this feels unreasonable, right? Like you
Exactly.
this is exactly what the show is trying, what the video game is trying to do and what the show is doing. And I think they've done probably a more effective job in the television show. So I'm excited for what they do. And I love the idea. I was thinking about this earlier when you talked about the Mel being pregnant thing, not her being pregnant, but the like trying to save the baby notion comes from Mason. I feel like these two are like, I would be very nervous if one of them left the show. That's not a rumor that's out there, but I do feel like we've seen this before, like season 1 of House of the Dragon. Somebody left
The
that
guy that
show.
loves dark scenes, Miguel
Yeah. So like I feel like these two have a really good balance of like Druckmann knows what knows what he was trying to do in the thing. And I think Mason has this really good way of like adding flavor and depth to that in a television show. So I feel like I've really enjoyed talking with the season about you, Taran. I feel like Mike and I do that first pass, but then I feel like sometimes you're coming in with like these like just very smart takes on the show. So it's been very fun, and I appreciate everybody who's listened to our deep dive along the way. So if you're dropping out, we'll do a little bit of a spoiler section now, unless you have anything else on the first section, Taran. But I think we've
well, I also want to call out. I'm trying to find her name. There's a co-writer for Neil Druckmann that worked on the game that has co-written the last 2 episodes. Who basically the reason I want to make sure I shout her out is because I think that she is also like a key part of this. I think that she understands character and theme really, really well. From what she's been on the podcast the last 2 episodes. and I've loved what she's had to say. In some way, in some instances, I feel like she's shown a better understanding of the characters than sometimes
Mm,
Neil and Craig have,
mhm.
which I think is really interesting. Haley Gross,
Yeah, Haley Gross, yeah.
yeah, something.
Or Hallie. It might be Hallie Gross,
Hallie,
but
might be Hallie.
yeah.
But I agree. I think that like the three of them together really, apart from really screwing up Scar Island and the dialogue in for I-610.
I'm gonna until I hear further, that is completely to me the HBO executive who was like, "We're gonna need a thing in here." Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I agree. I think obviously Craig Mazin has a really good instinct for TV. I think that Neil Druckmann has a really great instinct for theme and character, and I think that the two of them together make a formidable team for sure. And I think like the way that I'm seeing it is and Neil has talked about this a little bit, that like he's seeing the show as a way to make some small tweaks and improvements on his original sort of thing. And I think some of those come from Craig, and some of those come from Neil himself, who felt like maybe there are ways I can improve it. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think that anybody that makes anything creative would tell you, like, it was never finished. It just got released. And so having another crack at it is really cool. And sometimes it's bad,
Sure.
if it's like, say, Star Wars. But
Sure.
but sometimes it's good. And in this case, I think it's good.
I agree. All right. We are going to head into spoiler section. We'll be spoiling the rest of The Last of Us Part 2. So if you need to drop out, thanks for joining us along the way. We will not see you back, but make sure you just watch the Tastemakers or listen to the Tastemakers with Taran and I and anything else we're doing. Okay, Taran, where do you want to start with? I don't think there's that much. I think some of the idea behind most of this podcast as we're like watching season 2 is to mostly be thinking about season 2 rather than where it goes, but I think we could probably talk a little bit about how we imagine things unfold and play out. One thing I wanted to say earlier about the trip to Scar Island and why I think that to some degree I do agree with you that they could have done more there, but I also think I think there's probably a decision that is made about when you sort of start to um include more of the Seraphites, and I do think that like Lev and who else are we it's in the game. I do feel like that piece of it I feel like is like likely why I would presume they chose not to do, I think, episode run to like season runtime and that sort of thing. But it does feel like that's such an important piece of the of Abby's gameplay, of like her connection with specifically
Mhm.
some of the Seraphites, that I think it does make sense to not like kind of rob Abby of that storyline. So I wanted to say that, but I didn't want to say it in the first section because it is to come, basically. Yara and Lev
Right.
is who I was talking about.
I mean, and that's kind of the thing, is that like, and you can see the marks on Abby's neck at the end of the
Right.
episode.
Right.
So like, I have to imagine that they wanted there to be an intentional, again, mirroring of the experiences that Abby and Ellie go through. So they are both going to be in the basement, just on different levels. They are both now going to be hung by the Seraphites and survive. Um, and so I think they wanted probably more of that. They probably liked that connection. But on the other hand, it's like, if you repeat too much, like, are you taking away from what's to come
Right.
in those storylines? So I think there's a little bit of danger there, especially like the fact that we saw Ellie go through it, and it really felt I talked about this in a couple of previous episodes, that like when they were in the TV station, I felt like, how in the world are they going to get out of this?
Right.
And I knew they would, but it felt hopeless because they were really good at providing those feelings. This situation did not make me feel that.
Yeah.
I never for an instant thought she was in a lick of danger in this scene. And again, that's obviously, I know she's going to get out of it, but like, I also knew she was going to get out of the TV station, but that one made me feel like, what? Whereas this one, I was like, I guess something is going to interrupt this. Like, I was thinking of all the ways that it obviously shouldn't end up happening. And so I think that takes away some of the danger of what Abby might face later. It's like, oh, we've seen this before. We know that it'll probably just get interrupted. like,
Yeah.
and obviously you know that on a story level. But if you've seen it happen and you've seen it fail, I think you're even less likely to be as like terrified by it in the future. So I think there's a bit of that too. But yeah, again, I just think that we needed to learn more if we were going to spend some time here. And I think, quite frankly, the best thing to do, I imagine, would have been to just cut this out entirely.
I was just seeing the thing on Reddit too, that was like somebody was saying, "Oh, I think the explanation for the scene is because she wants to save a kid and she chooses not to save that like they don't save a kid earlier." I do think people are really looking for reasons to root for Ellie. I feel like that is and I think that this show is supposed to be making you question whether or not you should. And I don't mean to say this is like if you are 100% rooting for Ellie the whole time throughout this whole season, like you're a bad person or something. It's really not that. I don't want to be that extreme, but I think the show is really you're supposed to question about the morality of these characters, and I don't really. And so, in essence, I do kind of like disagree with that being the reason for that scene. That like, oh, she could have saved this kid who then ends up like. I guess there is something to like maybe Jesse was right earlier, and Jesse is maybe supposed to be thematically more right about these things. Also, ultimately cost him. He's whatever. Okay, the one thing I want to talk about is this room. Not the rumor. I guess like this idea that there will be 4 seasons and of the show, and whether or not I think the big question for me, Taran, is are we or is season how much new content are we getting? Are we getting anything that is past The Last of Us Part 2, or are we in actuality splitting up The Last of Us into Part 2 into 3 seasons, which to me seems like too much. But I'm interested in your thoughts on this, as the announcement is that there are going to be 4 seasons of the show.
My instinct was, as I mentioned before, pretty pessimistic, which maybe surprises me because I've been a pretty positive voice for the show so far. Generally, I usually like a lot of the changes that some people are more skeptical about. This one, I was really like, and I still kind of am. I'm like, I don't know about that, because I'm trying to think of like, how do you structure that? For as much as I liked the ending of this season, obviously the instinct, I would say, for you're going to split it into 2 more seasons would be, okay, well then we're going to do days 1, 2, 3 in Seattle from Abby's point of view, and then season 4 is going to be the kind of like epilogue section where Ellie's going to hunt after Abby again, and all of that stuff's going to happen. They're going to have their final confrontation, all that. But there's a few problems with that, I think, which is first that what I call the epilogue content is not enough. There's not enough meat on that bone, figuratively and literally in the game.
Also, you're gonna cliffhanger season 2 and then not deliver on that
point.
content. Yeah, okay.
That was my second point. Yeah. Is that I don't think there's enough content there as it stands. And then the second point is to end on this cliffhanger in season 2, and then spend the entirety of season 3 only getting back to that moment. I don't think that works, especially in a world where you waited 2 years to get there and then have to maybe wait another 2 years to get past there. That cannot work.
Somebody, TV historian in the who's watching, please let me know if a show has ever done the exact same cliffhanger 2 seasons in a row, years apart. I would be stunned to know how that went over. I'd love to know.
And like, sure, you might say it's not as much of a cliffhanger because we can conclude the scene. And maybe you can end it with Ellie and Dina on the farm. But like, I don't think that works. I really don't. I think that you need more forward progression, especially because this is the biggest issue. The next season is just doing it all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it can't be that. I do think that, you know, probably, you know, like, I'm like, it's real early to make these predictions, but I think probably, like, it probably doesn't take that many episodes. I think probably, like, 3 at the I feel like 3 to 4 is about, like, you have to cover a bunch of that Abby stuff, and that by the time
I
you get
think
back
I
to that,
think you could
you
I
think
think you
sooner.
could do 4 to 5. I think that you could do
Okay,
4 to 5 Abby episodes because you might include a standalone about
that's true. Yeah.
Isaac or the Seraphites or something that maybe involves Abby, maybe involves Abby's dad, include some of those flashbacks. I think that there's a lot, like I said, I think there's a lot there in Abby's plot in Seattle that doesn't exist in Ellie's portion. We are learning a ton about the world around us. We're being introduced to new and interesting characters. And we're learning to like Abby. And I think that the show has already put in the groundwork for you to not only like be like, okay, I get it, I'm fine with Abby now, but actually genuinely root for Abby and really like Abby in a way that a lot of people who played the game felt, but also a lot of people in the game never fully came around to. And that's again where I think the show has really helped. Especially with Caitlin Dever playing Abby, I'm already seeing people being like, "Oh, she's pretty badass. She's pretty cool."
Which is
And
funny because
I
it was the
think
initial reaction to them casting Caitlin Dever as Abby was like, she's not, she's too, it doesn't look right. You know, it's like, it's
I
so
saw a lot of people
funny.
say this was the first time where I was
Yeah.
like, "That's her. That's Abby. She nailed it." And so, which I want to talk about visuals in terms of actor look a bit here too. But I think that Caitlin Dever leading the season as Abby in season 3 will be. I think she's going to be very popular. I
I
think
think
that
so
she's
too.
going to really, really kill it.
She
And
is,
I think that
she's doing what everyone wants Ellie to be like. She is
mhm,
just like going for like, you know, she did the thing that everyone was like mad that Ellie wasn't doing. So, yeah.
exactly. And what I think that also does is like I do think that sets us up really well for the epilogue portion
Yeah.
where I think we are genuinely going to be like, no, don't kill her.
Uh-huh.
um, whereas I think, again, in the game, they don't do that as much.
Right.
And sort of intentionally, I think that like in the game, it's more about the message than the characters in some ways. And I think that loses some amount of emotional impact. And some people liked that. Some people liked that it was hard, that it was difficult to sort of endure the game. But I think that if you are going into the final confrontation between the two of them and you're genuinely like, please, I don't want either one of you to die. I desperately don't want Abby to die. I think that helps. I think that helps with your investment and with like the story as a whole. And again, I'm sure some people were there when they played the game. I wasn't quite there personally, and I know a lot of other people weren't either. By the end of the game, they felt exhausted, which is part of what the game wanted you to feel. But I think there's a way that this can really work well in the show. But again, so then it comes back to like, how do you set this up in 2 more seasons? If you had told me that the game 2 is 3 seasons from the start, I would have said, okay, I see that. You add more in before Joel dies. You give some extra Joel stuff, and you end somewhere in Seattle, early portions of Seattle, and then you go through season 2, and maybe you end on day 3 like they did here, or maybe you end somewhere during Abby's thing. Who knows? And then the third season or fourth season would then be like most of Abby's stuff plus the epilogue stuff. But given where we are right now in the story, I mean, I don't remember exactly. I feel like this is halfway through the game. Um,
Yeah, basically, yeah. It mostly is, yeah. So like you don't have that much of like because, yeah, there's not like that much Abby stuff, and then the stuff with, especially because I mean the length of the game is really because like you take every single thing that happens in the, like you know, every trek to find a person is like many different like something, and especially at this point of the game I felt it was very like sneaky, like you have to be like crawling through the grass or else you like just get shot with bow and arrows by all the seraphites. So like it is long, but it's, I think there's a way to shorten it in this back half. I think we're in the back
Yeah,
half here.
I'm looking at and this is not like going to be completely accurate, but I'm looking at Last of Us 2 all cutscenes, full movie.
Yeah. So
And it's about 11 hours total,
yeah,
and this moment is nearly 6 hours in. So it's a
yeah,
little more than halfway through the game.
yeah. So the thing I would say as well is I think so. I mean, I feel like this is gonna dovetail a little bit with what I think the combo you want to have about character looks in a moment. Um, I do one thing that in terms of like the last bit where like the final Abby and Ellie confrontation, I do think on one hand, I think people are going to be okay with Abby not dying. I also do think there's like the reverse thing is I feel like people aren't going to be relieved with Ellie for having that. Like the big sentiment I'm feeling on the, and again, this is like the most like internet brained people, is this like dislike of Ellie and the changes they've made to Ellie. I think the piece of that makes it tough that I'm wondering how much is in their brain, like Mason and Druckmann. And I really hope they're not like so influenced by what kind of the worst sections of the internet are feeling, but also so much of this game relies on the end, like the ending is a pretty miserable ending. It's like not, it's not a happy ending, and how much of that feels good from a like I mean the point is that like that's not really a great, I don't mean not great video game ending, I just mean as like it's not a traditional video game ending. um it's also not a traditional television ending, and so the idea that like that almost, so, I mean, to summarize a little bit, right, that Ellie returns and she's lost everything. She's lost her finger, she can't play the guitar, she does have the flashback about the conversation with Joel, but she's lost Dina as well, so like Dina has left. So to me it definitely feels like there's a ton of room to move forward after that, where you try to get Ellie to at least something more of like a conclusion. So much of the point of the end of the game is like that was really worthless to have gone through all of that to be, and to be literally left with nothing when you could have just, you know, raised a baby with Dina. But um I'm wondering even how much next season they might like, is that the end of next season, like the actual end of part 3, or are they already going to
Right.
seed in potential ways to make it so that there is a, I don't think it needs to be the happiest ending we've ever had, but I do wonder how much of an appetite there is to like, and again, I think this is from an HBO lens of like not to have it be that sad, which you could just tweak, like you could just have Dina not leave, but I feel like that robs the story of a lot.
I think the ending will be the same. I think that you can't have like Dina there. You can't
Yeah.
have, you know, like it's so important to the story that the ending plays out in the way that it does. And I can't see like Neil Druckmann being like, yeah, let's change
I agree. I
those
agree. I
key
trust.
things.
Yeah.
Um, but I do like one way that the game I think undermines its own ending is something that we've talked about, which is that like as Ellie, you are killing hundreds of people throughout the game,
Right.
like all over the place.
Yeah.
And so it kind of falls into that like trope in fiction of like I have killed thousands of your soldiers, but I will spare you, the leader of those soldiers, because I am
Yeah.
a good person.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, like it doesn't. It might not have the impact that it could in the show if she's killed 5, 10 people, right? Like enough is enough. I killed Mel, and you know I killed these people, and now like it needs to stop. Um, and uh, and so I think that's one way that it can feel a little more, I think, hopeful, where it's like in the game, it's I don't know. In the game, the idea of stopping violence feels totally futile to me because
Yeah.
I'm like the entire point of the game is violence.
Yeah.
The violence is the gameplay. And if there's ever a game 3, I have no like delusion about the idea that I'm going to play as a pacifist Ellie who's no longer killing people. Like, that's not going to be the case. I'm going to be murdering the hell out of a bunch of people if I play as Ellie. However, in the show, it is feasible that she like kind of gives up on killing, at least in this way. And so what is, I think, more symbolic in the game can be a little more physical, a little more real in the show. And I think that can help it feel a little more hopeful. I know there are some people who played the game who feel like it does still have a hopeful edge to it because she did break the cycle. But I, like I said, I think it might feel a little more tangible in the show. Then the other part is, and I think the real question now is, does 2 more seasons mean more content beyond what we saw? Either at the tail end of it, meaning like stuff after the ending of the game,
Oh, yeah.
or probably more realistically, fitting more stuff in the middle, and adding more into think about like maybe scrapped ideas for DLC that they had, or like different ways that they can sort of extend the journey in the story, where especially for that epilogue portion, or maybe even for the I can't imagine you do it for the Abby stuff, but like I think there's a lot you could add in at the tail end to juice up that final season, and bring more to it. If you're going to have a whole season for it, that would be my best guess as to what they're currently planning.
Interesting. I'd love to hear what people think. If you're gonna
I
comment,
also
give a lot of space, but yeah.
Yes, I also wonder. Sorry to interrupt, but I
No, you're
also
good.
wonder, because this is another thought I had, which is like, was part of this decision, was it a fully creative decision, or was this a decision of this show is still doing really well, which it is,
It
at
is.
least from what we are seeing. Despite I tried to look up like audience numbers, and some of the top results are like Last of Us ratings tank after Joel dies, from the people who hate that happened. And then the article it links to literally has viewership numbers going up after he dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, and none of the comments, even like 2 of the comments are downvoted at the bottom, mention that. It's like, this is the level of dedication people have to hating this
They're
show
so
and
mad
story
right
and
now.
game.
I accidentally went to the Last of Us Part 2 Reddit, which is not the Last of Us Reddit, and that place is
that
a
is
nightmare.
that is the hate subreddit,
It's
from what
bad.
I've
It's
been able to
real
gather.
bad. Yeah.
That is, yeah. So that is like the subreddit that was basically created in order to like hate Abby,
Yes.
for
Yep.
very, very malicious reasons. So I checked the average viewership for season 2 is, without the finale numbers, basically the exact same as season 1, so far. Season 1 gained viewers over time. Season 2 basically just opened really big, lost some viewers, and then retained those viewers for the rest of the season, basically. So it wasn't like it continued to grow necessarily, but it's still doing great numbers, at least for day of viewership. That's what we have available to us right now, at least. The
11
HBO
minutes
release
ago,
numbers.
we have numbers on the finale, which is it drew
Okay.
3.7 million cross-platform US viewers, so that's just in the United States. That's lower than the season 2 premiere, which had 5.3 viewers. But the network says they expect there to be significant growth after the Memorial Day holiday weekend. So yeah, it'll eventually
Yes.
rise to probably closer to like the 37 million viewers per episode that they've been getting. These are just the like who watched it, obviously, because we're only a day.
Yeah, so there's like the Nielsen numbers, which are like night of, watched it live, and then HBO has like their own numbers for who actually watched the whole thing.
And to give some
And
context, season 1, the finale did 8.2 million. So like, but again, this is a holiday weekend. So assuming that like people might not have watched Sunday, knowing that they could watch during the day on Monday. So
right. So and then I also like, it's, I think, important to know like, when did those numbers get reported.
The season one numbers.
Right. But either way, like, I think the point is that um, uh, like basically the show is still doing very well. And it has not dramatically lost viewership, at least in terms of what we've been able to see. And so, if that's the case, like obviously HBO wants more because it's doing well. They ordered another season. Was this something that HBO wanted? And Neil and Craig basically said, we can make that work. And then even more so, like if they do make it work, does this give over the next 6 years give Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog enough time to draft up Last of Us 3? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Which would be, if the show continues to do as well as it's doing, even in season 2, would be a massive cross promotion, sell the game, watch the show kind of situation. That's what's in my head, at least, in terms of what might be motivation behind this.
Yeah. So it does look like it was about the next day that they got the 8.2 million. So I do think the season 1 finale did significantly better than the season 2 finale, barring that we were only about a day and it's a holiday Monday. So again, like, so it's a long weekend, so people might be traveling, etc. So it's not that surprising that at the moment. And I think probably there's a world where, so I think that like 3.7 number could grow to where it certainly will still be down from 8.2 million, but not as much as it even seems right now. And then the other thing is, it does seem like week to week, it seems like season 2 had more viewers per episode than season 1 had, which makes sense when you think about the just for context again, just like to put that the beginning of The Last of Us did not do nearly as well. Like it grew, like it's doing the opposite thing.
Basically, yes. The Last of Us started season 1 started low and grew every week.
Yeah.
Season 2 started high,
Yeah.
and it didn't fall every week. It actually stayed pretty consistent through most of the season. But seemingly the finale did fairly poorly overall, at least so far. Which I do think is not a great sign in general. I think that I'd rather start low and high than start high and low. I'd be very curious to see where season 3 comes in. If it actually might do the opposite again, it might start low and then build up again, because people are more on board with Caitlin Dever as a lead than Bella Ramsey. But
I think also
yeah,
if you look at shows past their first season, this is also pretty typical though too.
Yes.
That people typically in future seasons of shows, like if a show starts high and loses viewership, that means the show is like likely going to get canceled. It's not building an audience, as opposed to a show that is returning will typically start a little higher and then try to sustain that number. And so unless you have such a breakout episode that everybody goes and watches it and checks out, right? But this is a pretty typical pattern for television shows.
This is not surprising to me at all. I expected the show to, like, season 1 was a like nearing cultural phenomenon level show.
Right.
And so was the game. And that's part of why the second game was so disappointing to so many people, was because they wanted more of what they got before. And Neil Druckmann did not deliver that. Neil Druckmann went in a different direction. That direction is never going to be popular. It wasn't for me, even in the show. And it was never going to be able to sustain cultural phenomenon level if they were going to adapt game 2 the way that it did faithfully. That's why in season 1, I was like, I think they might change things, because if they want to maintain the momentum they have, I think have to. They could do season 2 as well as they could. And I think that they didn't do it as well as they could, but I think they did it pretty well. It's not going to maintain cultural phenomenon status when this is the story being told. So However, I think what we're seeing is that when you start with cultural phenomenon and you're able to mostly maintain that, that's perfectly fine, probably for HBO. And so I imagine they're, again, given the fact that they have greenlit another 2 seasons, I think that they are very happy with what it indicates to me that they're very happy with what they're getting. So that's interesting.
I think what's interesting about, like, if we probably look back and listen at our season 1 coverage, and when we talk about the futures, about like what season 2 would look like, I think for me, I'll speak for me, I probably was a little worried that they would change things to cater to an audience who I think like were very upset about the game. That I was really worried about that, and I feel like they didn't, and I feel like they actually like massaged it to a way that actually made those people, for many different reasons, mad, mad again, but for different things. But there has been this very interesting thing about the second video game, and I actually am quite appreciative of the way that I think Druckmann stuck to his idea for what the show was. So yeah, I think that's The Last of Us Part 2, unless you have anything else, Taran.
Well, I did want to just, I think, and I know I said the spoiler section would probably be smaller this episode, but then it turns out it's been quite long. But I've just been really interested in the response to Ellie and to Abby. I think my anticipated response moving forward, and I think that the Melanie Linsky character also kind of plays into this, where like there is a certain look to a character that you kind of expect, a certain vibe to a character that you kind of expect if they're going to be a certain way. And I think that if you don't get that, it feels very challenging. So like when Joel is being badass and dark and making choices that are dangerous and bad, you're like, what a complicated, cool character. When Ellie does that in the game and she looks really cool and she's being really bad, then you're kind of like, yeah, I get it. I get this version of Ellie. When Ellie looks like Bella Ramsey and she's masking and she's, not acting in the way that you either expect her to or want her to, it doesn't land. And I'm not saying that like I'm not guilty of this. I think that it challenges me too. When I see the comparisons, when I see Ellie in the game, I'm like, she does seem more badass than Bella Ramsey does. Like, but it's like that to me is something that I'm trying to challenge in myself of like, why do I feel so much more attachment to seeing Joel do this versus seeing Ellie do this in the show? And why is it that when I see Caitlin Dever on the screen looking really freaking badass, like that, I have like an instinctual reaction to that is more positive than when I see Bella Ramsey do it as Ellie. And I think that this is obviously at the heart of a lot of the controversy of the second game in the first place. It was the look of Abby that really was the thing that people could not stand in the second game because she looked too masculine. And, that on top of her function in the story was too much for people to handle. And I think that undeniably Bella Ramsey is an incredible actor, and I think that they have done exactly what the story is called for. And the fact that I think anybody is questioning their acting choices at all is, in from my perspective at least, so much more in line with how they think that they look as the character of Ellie than how they're performing the character of Ellie. And there's certainly plenty to say about the way that the writers are writing the character of Ellie that play into that as well. But I just find it so interesting, and I really do genuinely believe that if Caitlin Dever played this version of Ellie written the same way and acted the same way, she would not have nearly as much criticism as Bella Ramsey is. And I think that's something, even if you don't agree with me, even if you don't think that that's how you see it or whatever, I think it's something worth examining and thinking about, because for myself, it's something that I'm finding interesting to think about. And I really enjoy at least challenging myself when I think that I'm experiencing something that feels like an instinctual bias in any direction. And so I've personally found that interesting, and I thought maybe some other people listening might as well.
Yeah, it's a thing that I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, when I stumbled onto this other Reddit, I find it's such a cesspool, it's such a nightmare. It is predominantly just taking the most distorted screen grab of a moment of Ellie and posting it. And I think it's like horrific. And I think when I was watching the first episode of this season, I was like, oh, it is tougher for me because I think Ellie is supposed to be older than I feel like Bella Ramsey seems. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, like actually they're in line with how old they were. So this is a real, 19-year-old who exists in the world. It's very interesting to me that Bella Ramsey became, on the scene by being a little badass, person in Game of Thrones. And now I think that is just sort of an interesting thing in terms of like, yeah, she was they were Lyanna Mormont for a bit. But yeah, I just
Missed
think
opportunity not being a Ramsey.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, the thing that the thing that I keep going back to is I think there is a level, even though it's wrong, there's so much catharsis you can get out of. That's why people can relate to revenge stories, because it's like, oh no, but I would feel really good if I got to like kill the person who killed my father. It's like I would feel good. So and so I think that there's this level to which, and again, I keep going back to this, but in the video game, you kill so many people that like it's a fun video game thing. And I think people are really struggling with this idea of like this version not being this gloomy, 100% focused on, enacting violence and killing and shooting and all of this stuff. And when they're not getting that, I think that they're lashing out at something that to me feels like a subconscious bias that people have to make fun of the way Bella Ramsey looks. So
I
yeah.
I think that people expect the things that they're used to, that they feel are normal. And when you experience something that is out of what you consider to be the norm, there is very often an instinctual rejection of it. And when it's a show, then you can say they're making the wrong choice by doing something that doesn't feel correct or normal to me. But when it's real life, it's a lot more dangerous, and it's a lot more. It plays a lot more into bigotry and a rejection of people and who they are. And so, I think that examining that instinct in fiction is the safest place to sort of start to look at, why does this make me uncomfortable? Why do I not immediately gravitate to this in the same way that I might to something else? And so that's all. That's all I had to say.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Taran, before we sign
I
off?
think that's it. I'll shut up about this show.
No, don't, because we're going to record the tastemakers. We'll probably briefly talk about The Last of Us. So, yeah, if you're not familiar, follow us. We will. This is it. This is the end of The Last of Us until it returns. Taran and I do the tastemakers, where we watch television and tell you what you should and shouldn't watch, and give you our takes. What else you got going on, Taran?
Find me on YouTube. I'm dropping videos reacting to the Genius, and I made a Patreon where I am reacting to the Devil's Plan, and that's primarily because it's pretty hard to do reaction videos on YouTube without being demonetized, and the Genius videos got demonetized, which is totally fair, I think, according to the current rules. But I think it's cool content. So if you want to support me making it, you can go to the Patreon and watch some of the cool Devil's Plan stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I'm running on Parade about some things, and then here on RHAP. All right, that is it for our coverage of The Last of Us. Thank you so much for everyone who listened. It was enjoyable recapping it with you, Taran, and with Mike. So until next time, bye-bye.